Oh. Hello, everybody. I have Jennifer here, and she's here to share with us how she eliminated the daily meltdown cycle for 2 of her children. And we're going to talk a little bit about your experience getting into, working together. We started that in July of last year, right? Or was it June? I think it was July.
It was June, because I called you Memorial Day.
Okay. All right. Well, then May. There goes my timeline. And so why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself to the audience, help everybody know a little bit about you and your family, and one of the biggest results that you got after working with us.
Okay. Is this where you want to know why I called you?
Sure.
Okay. My children, I have 3 children. My husband and I have 3 children. Emily is 12 and Oliver is 9 and Alistair is 4. And from the get-go, I always knew that Emily was aware of what was happening. She was sensitive, very detail-oriented, good to go. But other than that, she was typical. And then Oliver came along, and he was also aware, but in a much more panicked state most of the time. And he was very clingy. He was called Mama's boy, and he didn't want to leave me. Yeah. And I was trying to work part-time and parent, and okay, so we just had to wait for him to mature. And then he was a little behind in speaking. And then he was a little behind on the timeline of potty training. And then he was a little behind and still crying when I dropped him off at his Montessori school. And all of these things. And so then at age 9, I was tired.
Yeah.
I was very tired. I was touched out.
Yeah.
And that infant season when you're I just can't wait for them to walk. My kid never left me. Right. And he needed me all the time. And it was so much pressure. And by age 9, the teachers were done because they'd lost all patience and grace at this point. He's tall for his age. So he was also not getting the benefit of the doubt from strangers or even people at church who didn't see him on a daily basis because they're why is he crying? Why is he melting down? What is happening? And I just felt so much shame and judgment myself as a parent. And I'm a teacher, and I am well-read and well-educated myself. Yes. And I have been on a quest to be the best parent I can be and stop the cycle of how I was raised with this, I'm a parent and you're the child and you will do what I say and I will threaten to spank you and yada, yada. I didn't want to do that. So we tried the natural consequences. I did parent talk and teacher talk with Chick Mormon. I did Love and Logic. I did responsive classroom. I teach at the Montessori school. So I've had lots of Montessori training as well. Right. And nothing was working. All this stuff that works on all the other kids wasn't working on my kid. Some days, though, it did work. And then I was yay, we're on to something. And then the next day I do the exact same thing and it didn't work. And I was tired. Yeah. And Megan crossed my Facebook feed and she said 2 magic things. She said, no more meltdowns. Okay. And then she said, free phone call. There is no risk. I will do that. And it was so funny because I'm Nate, that's my husband. We're going to do this call and you got to be on it and it's going to be great. What's it about? I don't know, but it's free and she's going to make the meltdowns go away. Okay. So I thought this was going to be another parenting class and it's not. And it's better. And I'm just so glad. Oh, I do want to tell you. So in my quest to figure out, I'm going to go with what was wrong with Oliver. We jokingly in the family called him JNR. He was just not right. That was the only diagnosis. Yeah,
I don't think we ever knew that. You never shared that with me. We mindsetted that out before you even got here, right?
Right. Yep. And so along this quest, we tried various diagnoses along the way with the pediatricians and specialists and therapies, OT and speech and everything. So we ended up at the Nationwide Children's Hospital to get an autism spectrum diagnosis or evaluation. And they're no, he doesn't. But he is emotionally immature and we don't call sensory processing an actual thing, and you should take him to counseling. And it's like, that's exhausting. Trying to find a counselor and insurance and one that works with kids and ones that knows what they're talking about and is going to do it the right way. And don't tell me about a sticker chart because that's not going to work. And don't tell me about timeout because that doesn't work either.
Exactly.
And I knew all this. And so I called someone locally, and she said, he sounds highly sensitive. Have you read Elaine Aron's book? And I said, no. And I said, but $10 for a book off Amazon is better than a therapy appointment. I'll take it. And so I ordered it right away, that one and The Highly Sensitive Boy, because he is a boy. So I read those books that summer, and I was like, yes. And this is the answer, because now I had words to explain what he is and why he is that way. And I'm like, that sounds like me too. And so then I'm self-diagnosing, even though highly sensitive is not a diagnosis. I know Megan will stress that. But this is my before mindset I'm telling you about, when I thought everything needed a diagnosis to be valid here in America.
That's it.
And so I read the books, and 2 years went by and nothing changed. I had words to explain him, but nothing else.
Quick fix.
And so then I called Megan, and wonderful things happened.
So what are a few of those wonderful things? Because there's a lot of them.
Yes. I'd say big picture, I changed. As a person, I no longer feel like a failure. I went into this thinking that I didn't know what I was doing, and I must be stupid, or why can't I figure out my own kid, or I must be doing something wrong. And working with Megan and her team and all of the other community people, I'm sure we'll get to that later, but that's one of the best parts, is so reassuring. Because I'm not alone, and I'm not the only one. Even though I'm the only one I can see in my town, in my circle of friends, like in the school, like I'm the only one I can see whose kid is making such poor behavior choices. I'm not really alone. There are a lot of people having the exact same problems. And that was just so reassuring. But then even with that, instead of commiserating with each other for having all these things happening in our life, we learned how to view them and how to help. So that they can stop.
Absolutely.
So I became more peaceful, and then the house became more peaceful, and it's not hard. Like
Wait a minute, Jennifer, you're telling me it's not hard?
Follow me.
Keep going.
It takes effort.
That's for sure.
It takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of effort over a long period of time. And I'm a sprinter. So the first thing I had to do, which took me, I think, all of boot camp to do, was break up with the sprinting mentality and embrace the marathon that is everything.
Parenting,
personal growth, child learning behavior thing, like, okay. And with that embracing marathon instead of a sprint, I was able to have grace on myself, grace on my kids, be more patient, view anyone with a bad day as not a sign of utter failure and everything's falling apart, but everyone's human. The kids are human just like me. I'm grumpy. Then sometimes they have bad days too, and that's okay. Okay. And like, how do we work through this? And not how do we shove past it? But work with it.
Love it. I love that. Now, I love what you're saying, because in order to break down in order to see faster leaps of progress, you have to break down the sprint mentality, look at it like a marathon, and then guess what? You actually speed up time, right? So let's talk about those tangible outcomes, the shortened period of an 8-week program, and what about that was transformational for you? What did you guys see at the end of such a short timeline?
I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but what came to mind is instead of focusing on something like handle your emotions as the goal, handle your, let's say, negative emotions. Instead, the little steps in between here and there, if I'm only focusing on this one, I see a lot more wins. Like, oh, he called me names instead of hitting me. That's good. That's actually progress.
Yeah.
And then just incrementally moving the step, but always staying focused on whatever we're at and setting aside the things we're not working on in the moment. And I think that's a big thing, because I look at his age and I think he should be able to do X, Y, Z. And why are we still fighting about this? And he should be more independent and da, 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 da. But if I think about all those things, I get overwhelmed and he gets overwhelmed, and then we both feel like failures.
Yeah.
But if I just tell myself that this week I'm going to concentrate and focus on this behavior, whether it's my behavior or his behavior.
Right.
And then keep track of all the times we achieve that, or all the evidences of progress, then we're able to win. I mean, you've got me tracking to this day. Like, since school started, I've got my wins column in my planner.
Love it.
And I just make it a point so that when I'm like, oh, everything's falling apart, I'm like, oh, but wait, we got to school on time 3 days this week. Last week it was only 2.
Yeah.
That's a win. That's progress.
Right.
Okay? Instead of feeling like a failure that, oh, we didn't get to school on time and everyone looked at us funny and had judgy eyes and blah.
Exactly. So what we're doing is we're noticing that you get to learn how to quantify your wins, qualify your wins, right?
Yes.
And not discount them, but also understand that with a system, it's a heck of a lot easier to know how you're making progress, right? Because as you mentioned before, you had been through all of the things, all of the resources, all of the evaluations, all of the books that seem relevant.
Yeah.
And when you throw everything at the wall to see what sticks, the spaghetti slides down the wall, right? So then you're just throwing it back up against the wall. It's overwhelming.
The step by step, I have to say I wasn't patient initially.
No, you weren't.
Because I wanted all the answers right away.
Of course, everybody does. Everybody does that. This is not a Jennifer problem.
You reminded me of that, and I kept asking you questions, and you were like, we'll get there. In a couple of weeks, it'll be fine. Just wait, patience. And finally, around week 6 or 7, I actually got on board with this, like you knew what you were doing, and that you were going to give me all the answers eventually, and that if I would just trust the process, I almost want to do boot camp again so that I can like trust the process the whole time and experience it. It's so fun. But one of the things that really stuck out to me was that when we had our boot camp calls with all the other participants, it was not just the reassurance that all those other people were having the same teeth brushing struggles and, oh, your kid doesn't like to wear underwear either. And I thought my kid was weird. And like these everyday things are normal across the highly sensitive child plane. And it also gave hope. And I was hopeless basically when I called you because I was tired, remember? And when you're tired, you're hopeless. But by being on calls with people who are living the same day-to-day existence as you are, but a couple weeks ahead of you in the boot camp process, they're like, oh yeah, I did that. And then I learned this, and then we did this, and now we're seeing this success. And it really fueled my trust in the process.
Right. So rolling admission supports you in noticing that it's possible for yourself, right? Because when we think about cohorts and how that can create a sense of feeling like everybody's in the same spot at the same time, some people think that that is a comfort, but what it doesn't give you is evidence while you're still looking for your own, right?
And I thought you were crazy when we first got in there. And I'm like, we're not at the same spot. We should work together. You bring a really important point, Jennifer, that I think is super, super crucial, because
when we think about, because you're a highly sensitive person, right? And so, if anybody hadn't figured that out by now, here we are. And so you're a highly sensitive person. And when we think about highly sensitive people and their gut distinctions, their gut decisions, sometimes, especially when we get on the phone, or they get on the phone, the first call with a member of my team, fear is leading the way in terms of how they make decisions, right? And so making a decision to change your child's life might include needing to feel 100% certain. And you jumped in with like, this lady's crazy, but we're still doing this. So help me understand that. Why was it necessary to take action then? And why were you sure this was going to work for you?
Initially, I wasn't sure it was going to work for me. But I was out of ideas. I was desperate. My kid was pulling his pants down at school in an effort to get out of doing his schoolwork. I also work at this school, and so it made it really awkward that I had the bad kid. And with my coworkers, and like I just felt so alone and panicked and desperate and hopeless, and I couldn't take it anymore. And I joke that, it's too bad the world had to have a pandemic for me to have the time off from life to commit to this boot camp. But thank you, world, for throwing this my way. Because we had nothing else to do this summer. We were home, we were boot camping. And it's what we needed. And it eliminated the outside views and pressure and judgments while I was in the process, which I think allowed my confidence to grow and see evidence and know I was doing the right thing. And along the way, I knew it was going to work because I was seeing those little wins, and I was hearing the wins of the other people, and the Facebook group talking to each other, and there's so much camaraderie and the access to you. Like there was never any doubt that you were there. Like I was not in this alone. And I think that was the first time I didn't feel alone, probably as a parent in my whole life. Because my kids have always been so different than other kids. And I've always been different than everyone around me. Do you want me to share about growing up highly sensitive? As Megan said, I'm highly sensitive, and I was raised with mismatched parents, and they didn't know what to do with me. And so eventually I just started stuffing all my feelings, and I basically earned the reputation of bitch, and because I was just cold and heartless and emotionless, and it was my survival skill. And obviously that didn't sit well with me, and so every once in a while I would try to reach out, and then sometimes somewhere around middle school, early high school, I mentioned suicide. I don't think I was ever super serious, but I desperately knew that I needed change, and I was laughing to whatever might do that. And so my mom panicked and took me to counseling, and the therapist said, she's not going to talk to me, so you might as well not waste your money and bring her back. And so that was the end of my therapy route. Oh, I see you cringing, Megan. So I've done therapy on and off with better therapists over the years, but no one had really pinpointed the highly sensitive trait. And in my 30s, I assumed it was just because I was a grown-up now and confident enough as a person that I was starting to just own it. I ask a lot of questions. I have a lot of inner thoughts. I like to share them. These are things that now I have I'm not just surrounded by people who don't like them and don't appreciate these qualities about me. And I cling on to my friends who do like that. But now I know that that's part of being highly sensitive.
Right.
And I don't want my kids to grow up that way.
Mm.
And so the whole program has just boosted my confidence as a human.
I love that. I love that. Because especially when you're an extroverted, highly sensitive person like yourself, right?
I'm actually introverted.
I know, but you come off as such an extrovert. It's a scale.
It is. I have learned how to fake it. I'm going to need a nap after this interview.
There's a balance then. You feed off of it, and then you also show it when you need it.
Yep.
And so the self-care is real, right?
Yes. Yes. And when you have children that don't nap for 9 years, you're very tired and you're never alone.
Yes. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And I want to speak to that because you mentioned hopeless and desperate, and those words for me, those are anchoring words, right? But you can't make a commitment like this if you have no hope, if you have no concept of what's capable for you, right? Because we've talked to hopeless people, right? And so what would you say is true? Because I want to anchor this for you here. Okay. What would you say is true?
You are good at finding the truer truth.
That's it. What would you say is true about you that helped you move past that emotion of hopelessness and move into action that change is inevitable? We have to do something different.
I think when you described the other people you have helped, and even on our interview, you said things, and it's like you were here, and you could see what was happening. And that's not stuff I've read in any of the parenting books or any of the other things I've done. It was spot on. And that's what maybe that's what fed the little tiny sliver of hope I had left. That you
trust.
You got it. You understood.
What I hear is trust. Trusting that connection was legit, right?
Yeah.
Like it was a legitimate care, heartfelt conversation we had. Yeah.
Because the logical part of my brain was like, you don't know this woman. She is in a different state. I mean, the internet is full of whack jobs. How do you know? Like, why would you give all your money? What is happening? But because it's like you were a fly on my wall, and there was just something that I was okay, yeah.
Because your husband was also that logical part of the brain too. You were like, honey, we're doing this. This is happening.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, I guess so. It took him a minute. It took him a while, right?
It did.
And that's okay, because what matters most is that you both care about your kids enough to make the change, right? Yeah. So it doesn't mean that skepticism has to be entirely gone by the time you take that leap. And so when we think about that related to skeptical, what did I ask you to do, or what did we ask you to do that sounded crazy or out of this, just irrelevant even?
I think when you told me to start with myself, and the first couple 2-3 weeks were not even about parenting, but it was about thinking, spending time with myself, my own emotions, and observing my child and liking my child, and making sure I was having my own mindful meditative times. And like, these are not the answers, Megan, is what I was thinking. And it really did take me a long time to get on board to trust the process again. That if I can manage my own emotions and I can be present in the moment, then I can be a better thermostat for my kids. And it's so fun because this skill, like, you really have changed me as a person. I see it in my classroom when I, in previous years, would have yelled at the students. I don't feel the need to do that. When someone's acting out, I see a need from them instead of the assumption that they're just being stinkers.
Right.
And so I'm able to respond better. Like, yeah.
So the ripple effect is impacting your classroom, right? We think about your skills as a parent impacting how you show up at work.
Yep. And I'm telling all my friends, and they're becoming better parents.
Oh, neat. That's awesome.
One of the mind-blowing things that came out of this course is that I used to think, the world is all about discipline and punishment. Bleh. And so I knew that wasn't the right way to go. And so I'd done all this work on changing to like natural consequences and that kind of thing. And that worked with Emily. And so I thought we were on the right page and I was doing everything right, but it wasn't working with Oliver. Now I know it's because he was too overwhelmed by everything else happening and his own shame for even doing it in the first place, and that he couldn't handle sweeping up the mess that he made when he got mad and he threw whatever. And just that shift of my mental view of the world, of kids, of my own household, and knowing that if I sweep up the crumbs today, that doesn't mean I'm giving in. And down the road, he'll work on that. But right now, I'm loving him for whatever the task is. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it talks about priorities, but it also speaks to the next question, because one thing that we do talk a lot about in boot camp is that it's not all about just loving your child where they're at, right? Because that can keep them stuck too, right?
Yeah,
because it breeds resentment. And so when you hear other parenting experts talk about, this too shall pass, the highly sensitive in you, the non-highly sensitive parent is like, yeah, but how? Right? And so my question to you is, do we address the how in boot camp?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
There's a good time to address the how, and there's a bad time to address the how. And when you want to address the how because
the delivery of the how
are looking at you and judging how you're parenting, or your kids freaking out in public, and you're like, I got to save face and do what is culturally appropriate. Like, that's not the right time to do the how. And no one can learn when their emotions are heightened, and no one likes to be yelled at, even as a grown-up. So if I did a lot of like, okay, if I was going to receive feedback, how do I want to feel? And like, when's a good time for that? And then I would try to set that up with my kids. You, at some point, had us toes and nose, paying attention to the kids. And I'm very much a results-oriented person as well. And so I like to do things. I like to check things off my list and get things done. And kids don't do well with schedules all the time. In terms of like productivity, they have other priorities, like finishing their Lego creation. And I was doing a lot of trying to make them into little adults. And when I stopped that, and I had more grace, and I sat next to them, and I just let them talk to me or sit next to me. Sometimes it's just a bunch of and we're just there coexisting. But I had to stop going over what I should be doing right now with my time, so that my energy could come down. And then they felt connected, and they started giving me hugs, and I didn't even realize they weren't giving me hugs. But it became very apparent at some point during boot camp where I'm like, they're very touchy and what. And I'm not a super huggy person, but I'm like, you're supposed to hug your kids, so like I would do it out of obligation. But then they started like, don't tell. They were seeking hugs, and they were coming to me like, can I have a hug? And I have a snuggle. And, I'd read at some point, you're not supposed to be the first one to let go of the hug. So I always knew that I had to keep holding on until they let go first. And so I thought I was doing everything right. and then everything was like, oh. And so now I have a litmus test going of, if I haven't had hugs from my kids, that means that they don't feel connected to me to seek the hug that they intuitively know they need. And so then I make sure I spend some time looking at them and talking to them and just hanging out with them. And I give them my full attention for that couple minutes. And then it's better.
Yeah.
And then when I say things like, hey, could you hang your coat up? Okay, is the answer. Because a year ago, I would say, hey, could you hang your coat up?
Exactly.
Dude, it's such a coat. And then I would do this. So that's changed.
So that's changed. That's new.
That's way different now.
This is our life now.
Yeah.
And so you got to have skills to maintain that, right? And you got to see repeatable progress to maintain that. Because, for parents who are just like, I can do that, or I've been there before, right? There's a bigger picture here to pay attention to. And that's where the accountability comes through, right? As you mentioned, being able to reach out to your support systems and having a whole umbrella of support. And because that accountability piece and the step by step piece is the difference between somebody who's throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, reading about things about hugs. Like, I've never read that. BT dubs. Like, if you have a boundary and you're done hugging, you can say, like, pink permission slip, here you go, I'm done hugging, bud. Like, and help your kid manage that. So Jennifer, go ahead. if you're touched out,
your book, I don't know.
Who knows? And so that's the thing, right? Like, having the whole picture and having the whole picture allows you to decide where your boundaries are. And so, when we think about what's so wonderful about this conversation, Jennifer, is that you started by saying, my child is a Velcro child or an octopus child. Like, I like to use that language because it's like, my child has consumed me with their needs. And now you're like, there's a litmus test if my kid isn't coming back to me. And what that does is it creates a security in your household that I see. That your children are not, and your middle child, to be exact, is not needing to feel glued to you in order to survive. And instead, he feels capable of surviving, and he feels even more capable when he connects and goes in with you. And because you have the skills to assess his needs and to meet his needs effectively and to do that systematically, now you don't feel overwhelmed when he needs your help, even though you're a sensitive person with tactile sensitivity, right? And an introvert who shows up like an extrovert, which is funny. That's like Autumn, right? On the team as well. And she says the same thing. You wouldn't know it, but I'm an introvert. Exactly. And so at this point, what would you say are the biggest takeaways that you would want the audience to understand? Or if you had to give any advice to parents who are listening at this point, what's imperative for them to learn from our conversation?
I think one thing to understand is that you're not writing Megan a check for 8 weeks and then see you later, you're out the door. It's not like a college class or a weekend retreat, and then you go back to your life when it's all done. There's the connection and the community while you're in boot camp, and then there's the connection and the community when you're out of boot camp, because you're still doing the boot camp stuff. You're revisiting and relearning and getting better at all the same lessons. There's new content being uploaded, so it's not like you're out of luck. You get to watch the new and the old. The accountability in the alumni is amazing because we're still living the life. And we still have the daily struggles, and we need the reassurance and reminders of what we know, and we just forgot we knew it. And sometimes we need new ideas because our kids are entering a new phase, like hello hormones. And wow. And so we have new skills to learn now.
Right.
And there are other people who are a couple years ahead of you with their children who have already done that. And so they can help you. And Megan and her team are still part of it. And they comment and they feedback and they reach out if they see anything that needs reached out for. And I don't feel alone. I still don't feel alone, even though I've graduated. And I think that's super important because you don't keep paying for this. It's not a monthly subscription. You're just you're in the group for life, and you get out of it what you put into it, which I think is also something. I mean, yes, they say that about everything in life, but it is true. If you want to walk away saying boot camp didn't work, odds are you didn't do it. And it's not hard. Remember, it just takes effort.
Yeah.
a lot of effort, a lot of self-talk, a lot of sticky notes on your mirrors, a lot of gratitude lists, a lot of making time to retrain yourself when you have that 20-minute car ride to turn on recording, whether it's from boot camp or an alumni call or just a positive thinking mindset something podcast.
I love that. It reminds me of the Facebook post you put. You were like, how do I get the technology to help my commute? And then everybody else is like, here. You're like, thanks. Not my skill set.
No. I own earbuds now.
What?
I know. We've come a long way.
Yes, you have.
And I don't know. It was kind of am I willing to give up what I'm doing? Okay, if I spend 3 hours on Facebook cumulatively a day, am I willing to spend 2 instead and spend the other hour doing boot camp homework or, playing games with my kids or something? I don't know. Things like that.
Yeah.
It's about you as the parent. It's not about your kids. But yet then it becomes about your kids or in the other way.
Yeah.
I hope you understand what I'm saying.
That's it. It's all connected because it's a family system solution, right? The whole family, the whole dynamic. Your kid's not broken. You're not broken, right?
No. And it works on all your kids. And I loved that. I loved that when I called you initially about Oliver and you said, is there any self-harm talk? And I was like, no, but my 12-year-old wants to jump out her window. Is that a problem? And you're like, yes. And you switched gears fast. And you're like, let's work on that. And so, I mean, that's been a struggle of mine all through boot camp and beyond. Just like, I can't focus on one kid because I've got the two extremes, the self-harm on the one kid and the hormones. And then I've got the other one who is more highly sensitive and therefore has further to come to work with society and social and school. And so it's been a constant juggle. And so honestly, some weeks I focus on one and then the next week I focus on the other, and I can't split my attention, and I've had to give myself grace on that. And yep, I'm not as far as I would be if I only had one kid and was able to like super focus on the one. But between the two kids and my own getting to know me, highly sensitiveness, and now my 4-year-old is starting to do things that I would previously brush off as just being 4, but now I'm like, ooh, no, I think he's looking a little highly sensitive here.
You might have a trifecta on your hands, Jennifer.
I'm like,
at least you know what to do.
I'm in this for the long haul. I know what to do. Yes.
And you don't have the biggest family in boot camp, so there's that.
No, I don't. Yes. Oh my gosh. I latched on to another mama who had 4 kids and was a couple weeks ahead of me, and I was like, my hero. So you'll find someone out there in the group that has some similarities that you need, and then you'll become like besties and like boxing buddies and like Facebook friends and sending Christmas cards to each other. It was so funny this year when Christmas cards came. Me, my husband, and the kids are like, "Oh, these are like real people. They're not just online."
You have international friends now.
It's so fun.
That's fantastic.
We're each other's greatest cheerleaders.
Oh, yes, you are. Absolutely.
And accountability partners, because we don't take it. Mm-mm. Step up.
Nice. Love it. Love it. Love it. Right. I love that, because that connection is what you need as a parent, right? Not just, oh, it'll work out, right? The comforting conversation that leaves you feeling empty-handed after the fact. So we don't have chit-chat support.
Who know where you're coming from.
Exactly.
Yes. They're not going to tell you, try this. Don't call it a timeout chair. Call it a happy chair, and then it will work better. Like, okay, both of those are wrong, but I digress. But I mean, that's an example of how you're constantly going to other friends or people or not friends on Facebook, like in groups, trying to solve the problems. Here we all understand where we're coming from, and we're all on the same page, trying to get the same results of happy, peaceful homes with appropriate, emotionally well-adjusted. There you go.
That's it.
Well-adjusted kids.
That's it. Yes. That's it. Breaking that cycle. I love it.
Yes.
All right. Anything else that you want people to?
Looking at my nose.
I know. You prepared.
I think in the wake of all of this, I've grown in my confidence to advocate for myself and to advocate for my kids. And since I am leading by example of how to have happy emotions appropriately and negative emotions appropriately and advocate for us, I definitely think that my kids are going to grow up and be able to go out in the world and not be, pushed one way or another, but stand up for their needs. And in a culture that values extroversion and values non-highly sensitiveness, we stick out, but we need our downtime. We need not overly full social calendars.
Yeah.
We need to take a break when things are too loud. And it's okay. And it doesn't mean we're broken, and it doesn't mean we're weird.
No.
And it doesn't mean that we need fixed.
No.
And it's really too bad the rest of the world doesn't want to just like respect us and love us for who we are.
They'll figure it out. That's why we're here.
Eventually, yeah. We'll just keep telling them.
That's exactly it.
And we're like I'm on the lookout for like other kids who are like, I'm going to say undiagnosed or undiscovered as highly sensitive. I'm like, oh, let me help you, because you are crushing that kid and adding shame to their life. We have such a sarcastic society. I think that's the biggest difference between what I got here, aside from it's about me first before I can help my kids, is shame. There's so much shame in our passive aggressive, sarcastic communication. And then the self-talk that comes, because that's what we hear around us. Yeah. And breaking that cycle is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's fantastic. It's freeing.
Yes. Yes. I'm kind of scared for all of this, like COVID's oppression to loosen, because I don't want to go back. I don't want to go be a part of the world that's so negative and mean. And right now I have this wonderful excuse to stay home and not interact with a bunch of people all the time. We can be in our happy little highly sensitive bubble, and it's wonderful. But I am
new opportunity for boundaries.
Yeah. And I've gotten to taste what it's like to have them. Yeah. And now I know how nice it is and how much I need it. And I can see it when it slips away a little bit. Like we have great school breaks, and then we go back to school, and rein it back in. We need a little more family time. Yeah. And it's all about growing the confidence to be different, to advocate for us.
And again, if, for those watching, if you're ready to know that being different doesn't mean you're wrong, if you're ready to know that being different doesn't mean that you're unnecessary. And if you're ready to decide for your children that being highly sensitive is a strength and you need support in helping them make that happen and helping yourself guide them in that way, then we encourage you to book a call. Go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk. We'll talk about how to eliminate those daily meltdowns, break out of that meltdown cycle and the shame cycle, as we spoke about here with Jennifer, and support your children in making safe decisions on a daily basis so that they can live their lives however they want to.
Yes. I love that you taught us about the highly sensitive people throughout history and how there's evidence of them in all cultures and how they're necessary. They're the ones that keep us from being eaten by lions.
Yes.
And that really helped. And I'm still trying to pass that along to my kids.
Yes.
That it is a strength and it is important and it's vital for the civilization.
Evolutionarily, right.
Yeah.
Can't be a weakness if you guys have been sticking around for this long.
Right.
It's necessary.
It's a good thing.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, on that fantastic note, thank you so much for sharing your story with all of the families who need to hear what you have to say. So appreciate you being a leader in that respect, Jennifer. It's been a pleasure and it will continue.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.